All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Arcade Leadership Podcast, where we help empower tomorrow's leaders through sharing of knowledge, experience, and inspiring stories. I'm your host, Rob Cameronpour, and my special guest today is Karen Zeigler. She's the Chief of Staff at the Octopus Movement. She's part of the design thinking consulting and trainer. She's the author, life coach, and founder of a nonprofit organization, and she was the VP of Bank of America. I will let Karen go into a little deeper dive into who she is and her background. And but before she does that, I wanted to take this moment to thank you very much, Karen, for taking time this morning to be on this podcast. I greatly appreciate it, and welcome to the RK Leadership Podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rob, for having me. I'm excited to be a part of your audience and have a great discussion about leadership and the road to purpose.
Awesome, thank you, Karen. If we can dive right in, can you walk us through your journey of discovering leadership and what it means to me, what it means to you?
Wow. Um, well, my leadership journey started after college. I was recruited for a bank that eventually, 10 mergers later, became Bank of America. And I was in their management training program. Part of that was kind of being enveloped in leadership in every area of the bank at the time. And so I had the opportunity of exploring, because it was a small bank before it became Bank of America, every avenue of banking, from operations to credit cards to um, commercial lending. Every department within the bank I got the opportunity to explore in that management training program. And obviously, looking at leadership, looking at how different aspects are led and all that. That was the start of the journey. And it's been a wild ride since then. It started out very linear in the banking world, and I'm sure it's a reflection of our times, became very nonlinear, right? Nothing ever is in a straight path anymore. There's always multiple paths and multiple opportunities. So
That's right.
what started out linear has become very nonlinear and a heck of a lot more fun, quite frankly. But it's still, for me personally, has always been about leadership and how do we have the greatest impact. And of course, we can dive in more into that, but that's been a passion of mine since those first days setting foot on the bank, in the bank, and not having a clue as to what I was doing and never having led anyone at that point.
Awesome. So, what was the point that what was that tipping point for you to want to get into that leadership role? And when you were when you were in your first leadership role, were you successful?
Ah, yes, and I was very naive. Um, but I thought, like many young people do, that I knew it all and was there to change the world, right? And I think that attitude is what landed me in the first leadership position that I had, which, coming out of the management training program at the time, uh, rarely had they put people directly into management from that point. And I was very fortunate enough to be chosen of two people in the class to go directly to management.
Nice.
And it's one of those, it happens often in business. They throw you to the wolves, and if you survive, you're a leader, right? Um, that was my um, experience, because they put me in a banking center that was brand new, so had zero customers at that point.
Mm,
It was back in banking where they took the map and they went a mile out from where there was anyone, and they put a new branch, right? And so I was in a new branch, not a single customer, a very outskirts of town, still developing. So let's see what she can do to attract customers. And I was very fortunate, because they did know of my inexperience, that they put a small team of very experienced and knowledgeable staff underneath me. And really more out of intuition than anything, started to tap into their gifts. And because they had done this before, they knew a lot more than I did. And so I didn't know it at the time, but we were using design thinking as a leadership practice, in that we
Mhm.
were empathizing with the employees, finding out, what success looked like for them, what had worked, what hadn't, and we just began experimenting and prototyping and testing, and ended up, that little office that didn't have a single customer at the start ended up winning the sales contest for the year,
Nice.
and obviously did really well as far as bringing in customers and deposits. And you know if not for my intuition and the great staff that I had been given, it would have probably failed, because it was had a lot of elements that could easily have failed, but it didn't. And I attribute it to design thinking and being able to tap into the talents that were given to me.
Awesome. We'll get into that design thinking a little bit later in the podcast, but
Yeah.
I wanted to stick to this theme right here, where you are now, you climbed that corporate ladder to the VP level of, Bank of America. How was that like? If you can share your experience, what did you learn from that, and what were some of your challenges to even get up there to that level?
Well, one thing I think, and perhaps this isn't the case for all leaders, but for me, I really love change. I thrive in change. I thrive in challenges. Um, I just love that environment. And in banking at that time, it was merger mania. So not only was I stepping into a new role, a new team every couple years, I was also a part of a merger, because we had 5 mergers in 10 years. So every 2 years, I'd get a new office, a new team, and would be dealing with a merger. So it was all about, how do we bring 2 different sides of the 2 teams of the merger together, integrate them, but don't forget, we have to succeed as a team. So it was a very high stressful environment. But what I had learned in that first little banking center that had 0 customers really served me well, and I just kept building on that, and succeeded every single time, and was quite, I guess, an anomaly in the fact that most people were struggling to bring 2 teams together to help them be successful at the same time. And it was all about, who's going to survive and who's going to get fired, and how are we going to learn all this new systems and, processes and products and services. And the team that I, was able to bring together, they were always, there was never that battle. It was always, we are together in this, and we all have the same goals, and we all bring unique gifts and talents to the table. We can do this. Yeah, it's going to
Nice.
be stressful, because mergers always are, and any sales environment has its own pressures. But if we're all showing up as our best selves, and using the unique gifts and talents that we have, we can do this, right?
That's right. Absolutely. Now, Karen, you did mention change and how you love change. What advice would you have to leaders out there about change and how to deal with some of that change?
Yeah, I think the key is, we say people don't like change and they don't like to change. People don't like change and they don't like to change when it's forced upon them, not when
Hmm.
they can create it. So if you want to shift, the attitudes and the mindsets of your team and your employees, get them involved in creating the change, because that
Hmm.
is how it's done. Because if you think about anything you've done in your life, what makes you most proud is when you see parts of yourself in it, right? From
Yes,
giving birth to a child to giving birth to a startup, right? It's seeing that part of you that, oh, I did that, thing in the world, and it's pretty awesome. that internal intrinsic pride is the key to shifting that mindset and that focus of change. And I
That's
think
right.
so many miss that.
Awesome. Well, that's fantastic. I couldn't have said any better. And I always encourage people to involve their teams, in a part of that change, and ask them for their advice and opinion and input, because everyone wants to be a part of that, right? So well
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
Karen. You also talked about rallying your team and creating that engagement. How did you create that engagement, Karen, within your teams, and what would you say your leadership style was like?
Um, well, I would say it was very inclusive in that I and humble to a point. Now, I was
Mhm.
young and I knew it all, but I also knew what I didn't know. And so there was humility in that. And I also knew that, the staff that I had that had been with the bank or a bank 5 years, 10 years, 15 years in some cases, that they knew things and had experienced things that I had not. And even outside of banking, their experience outside of banking had the potential to influence our banking experience. So I was always curious um, to learn what they knew, to learn how they saw the world, and how how they saw the world influenced how they did their jobs. Right. Um, so I would say that's kind of was my leadership style. I didn't like to dictate. I wasn't a dictator of sorts.
Mm.
My only dictate for the team was we have this vision, we have this goal. How can we get there together? And it was very freeing, I think. I think it was about the third promotion in, and I was talking to someone who didn't know me and I didn't know them, and so we were beginning to talk about ideas and things that she was bringing to the table, and she asked me, "Well, what if I fail? What if these ideas don't work?" And I'm like, "So what? We'll try something else." You know, um, and you have to be real and be honest and say, yeah, we're going to try many ideas, and not all of them have to succeed. Eventually, if there's failure after failure after failure with a person, then we have to look at, are you in the right spot? Is this the right position for you? But it doesn't
That's
mean you're a failure, right? It
that's
just means
right.
that this is not the best place for you to shine. So, yeah, that was some of the conversations that I would have during those times.
Awesome. No, I love that. Are you in the right role?
Yeah.
I don't think we ask that question enough of people, and we, like you said, just point them out as failures. But realistically, one of the reasons they fail is because they're not in the right role, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah. It's interesting, and I butchered this quote on the last podcast I was on, so I want to get it right this time. It was Einstein. It was Einstein that said, "If you ask a fish to climb a tree, he'll look very stupid." Right. So oftentimes we look at employees and we think, "Oh, how could they be so stupid?" Well, you got them climbing trees when they're fish, right? And so it's not that they're stupid; it's just that they're not doing the right
yeah,
role. And I think that's the difference for leaders. What is it they're gifted at? And don't ask them to do the things that they're stupid at. Ask them to do the things that they're gifted at.
that's right.
And you have to slow down for that, and you have to get curious for that. And I think that's where, leaders can miss the boat often.
I love it. Thank you, Karen. That's a great point, and I love that quote. Um, Now let's fast forward from the days of your executive days, and at some point you mentioned that you got tired of management. What made you realize this?
Um, this is where the road split, and I couldn't take linearity anymore. And
Mm.
I had to go a more nonlinear path because um, especially in large organizations, and I think you see this more and more since the pandemic. The rules are so rigid and the pathways are so narrow that people are not given the freedom to use their creativity
Mhm.
to solve problems. this is the way it's done. This is the way we've always done it. That won't work, which you haven't even explored it yet, and you're deeming it not workable. So that's what happened for me. That I kind of hit that wall where my creativity was being limited, and I couldn't sit there in the frustration any longer, looking at all these things that are easily fixable and not having the power or authority to start working on them. And so I said, okay, I need to do something else. And there was also kind of my life path at that time. My daughter was born, and I wanted to have a little more freedom to
Mhm.
be there for her and what she needed. So I kind of stepped away from management at that time and said, okay, let me just be responsible for myself and the job that I have to do, and so that I can be there for my family. So there was multiple pieces going into that switch, but leadership still came along with me, and just looked a little different.
That's right. Awesome. Now, you gave up your salary to take on a volunteering position. Why do you think
Mm.
that some people come to this point in their life to leave their 9 to 5?
Mm. Um, Part of the reason would be very similar to mine, in that they're fed up with the system and the constraints of the system. Um, they're, tired of masking. When you're in a large corporation, you have to um, play the tune, I guess, if you will, of the organization, and that may or may not be your tune. And there comes a point in life, for some it comes early, for some it comes later, that no, I'm not going to do it. And I think the pandemic actually has brought that realization to a lot more people a lot faster, in that this is the one short life I have, and it's going to matter, and it's going to not only matter in what I do and who I impact, but it's also going to matter to me. And it's going to bring me great joy, and use the talents that I'm here to bring to the world. So yeah, that's it for me.
That's right. Now, Karen, what advice would you give other people who are thinking about leaving their 9 to 5, and what should they be looking at before they pull that trigger to do that? Like, is there something, should they be starting something and then kind of transition into it, or just make that momentary decision? What advice would you have for them?
Well, they have to look at the entirety of their life, right? Because
Mhm.
we have our work, we have our passions, which are not always involved in our work. We have our family and the commitments that we have in the family. And then we have our own personal rhythms, right? Some may have the energy and the drive to, grind and hustle 24/7, 365. And then others, no, they want this next phase of their life to be more purposeful, more
Mhm.
slow and intentional, and actually more fun. And so um I would, encourage them to begin to design all that together before they jump out into the unknown. you know um, Bill Burnett, he's a Stanford professor at the D school, the design school. And he actually, in addition to teaching design thinking as a degree there at Stanford, he also has written a book called Designing Your Life, and probably would be a great read if you're going down that path. Because what I found in my multiple changes is, often we think we know what we want, and so we just make the leap, and then we get there and go, this isn't it. It's that we got the ladder on the wrong wall, and so we decide to move it to another wall, and wait a minute, that's the wrong wall too. But that book and design thinking in general can give you a more holistic approach, a more intentional approach to, what is the life that I want to design, and it involves all those factors.
Nice. So, Karen, you talked about purpose. I want to know what your purpose is in life and what you came about to discovering. And how does someone go about to find their purpose in life?
Mm. Um, well, for me, I think the turning point was after putting my ladder on the wrong wall about 4 times. I had gone through a number of coaching programs, and I decided to go back through one of them for myself. So I coached myself in that,
Hmm.
and it was Simon Sinek's Start with the Why coaching program. And there are a number of exercises in there that he has you examine your life. And in every stage of your life, what were you doing that allowed you to show up as your best self, doing your best work, having the greatest impact? And so when I did that exercise, there was kind of this thread running through all of my careers, from the banking career to the investment advising career to my coaching and writing to even the nonprofit that I established. And I called it, at the time, I didn't have a name for it, the track that my brain ran on. Like, no matter what job I went to, there was always 5 things that I did. And I said, okay, if those 5 things is my natural way of showing up in the world, and it's what brings me the most joy and allows me to have the most impact, then having written a couple books, I said, I need to find out how to write about this, because I can't just say, here's how I work and hire me, right? Um, and so in researching how to write about those 5 things and how to begin to make a business case for them, I learned that they called them a little differently, but it was the exact same thing as design thinking. And so I went and decided, okay, well, if I'm going to go out there and say, hey, I'm a design thinker, even though I've done this for X decades, I should probably have a degree, because that's what the world wants to see, right? So I went and got a degree in design thinking and innovation, and loved every minute of it. From the first class I showed up at, I was like, yeah, this is home right here. And I graduated right before the pandemic, and was ready to go out there and change the world. And of course, the world shut down. So I was like, I must not have been ready to change the world. But um, so I just did what I knew to do at the time, and that was start writing and talking about it. And because, at that point, I'd never really designed a product or a service or any of the things you normally think about when you think of design thinking, I'd only done it as a leadership practice and applied the principles to leading people and to helping people achieve their visions. That's what I wrote about, and that's what I talked about, and that's what I continue to talk about, because I've always been about authenticity. And so I wasn't going to go out there and sell myself as a product designer when I'd never had designed one. Not that I couldn't and wouldn't think it would be a blast, but it's just not something I'd done at that point. So yeah, that's what brought me here. And teaching leaders how to design the vision together with their teams is really my passion. I call it leading by design.
Nice. Leading by design. I love that. So you also stated that this is the future of leadership. Can you give us a little deeper dive into, again, the design thinking, what some of those principles are, and how is it that you think it's the future of leadership?
Well, and I also have a featured video on my profile on LinkedIn that shares why it's the future of leadership. But just to give you some of the highlights of that, um, in the Industrial Revolution, it was all about command and control, right? The leader was the
Hmm.
boss. There was a start point, there was an ending point, and we knew the steps to get there, right? So all we had to do was say, do this, do that, do this, do that. That was leader as boss. In the information age, the the goal was still pretty clear, but the means to get there was varied, right? So that's when leadership as coach came about. And
Hmm.
so we could coach our teammates to the goal, but we allowed them some variability in how they got there, right? Because there was multiple paths. But in the experience age, not only is the goal always changing, the path to get there is always changing. And so it's not about coaching someone to some goal, because if you've ever been on a project lately, it's changing every, few weeks. The project goal is moved to somewhere else.
That's right.
It's really about designing a vision. And so that's one of the primary reasons I believe that design is the future of leadership, because the goal and the way to get there is changing rapidly and all the time. It doesn't mean that leadership as boss and leadership as coach go away. No, there are just times and circumstances in every leader's job that requires a different skill. And when it comes to innovation, which is what every leader wants to be, more innovative. When it comes to managing change, which is a leader's top priority these days.
Yes.
When it comes to solving problems that have never been solved before, like we had so many of those in the pandemic, it really requires a different toolkit. And in my opinion, that is design thinking. And even Gartner research is starting to reveal that, like the number one skill that the C-suite has been seeking by like 170 something percent is design thinking. And the reason for that, if you look at the other skills they're seeking, is all those other skills beneath design thinking are problems that they're having to deal with in their organization, right? And so design thinking is known as creative problem solving. It is the tool for creative problem solving. So it makes perfect sense that the number one skill they're looking for is going to help them with all the other skills that they're trying to master as a C-suites. Yeah. So
awesome. So yeah, and that's where I think you talked about direction and vision, because goals don't need to be clear. Now, when we talk about direction and vision, I think that's where some organizations really struggle with this, because again, you've got the fancy words on the wall, as I like to call it, where you post a vision, mission. How do leaders ensure they're actually following that vision, and how should they be communicating that with their teams to make it stick, to to get people aligned with that vision, Karen?
Yeah. Well, I teach this in my design thinking for leaders class, but vision is paramount. Everything starts with vision. That should be the first thought in your mind, no matter what it is you're about to decide, is how does this align with my vision? What sets people off on the wrong course is oftentimes their vision is based in ego anyway. It's not based in creating a better future for your customers, your employees, your organization. It's really ego based, and you can see that by the wording of the vision, by who it's talking about the most, about can you see a human experience in that vision? And what I mean by that, we're humans, right? We have a physical world, so there's something physical about the vision and what it's doing for the human. There's something mental, like when you understand a vision, there are certain images that will come to mind for you. And also the spirit or the heart. There's always a heart piece in there. What is it about the vision that's touching the heart of the human? Now, everyone has a different opinion about Starbucks and whether they're good coffee or bad coffee, but they've really done a great job on their vision in that it says, with every cup, with every conversation, we build community and something else. But it touches on all those: the physical, the images that come to mind, the heart of the person, connection, community, conversations. We have certain heart feelings when we talk about conversations with friends over coffee. So, but most visions are not like that. They're about, we're the global this and the 100 companies that, and it's all about me, 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 from an organizational standpoint. But really, I think that's probably the first misstep with vision, is that it's about us and not about the vision we want to create. And it's not about humans and making a better life for us and the planet. It's about, how can I get this big and make this much money? which is all well and good. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It just has to have balance, right?
That's right.
The second thing is, and I think AI is going to transform this, quite frankly, but even for the leader that keeps their vision in mind, they often think, okay, this is my vision, so I need this position and this position and this, and that's going to put the puzzle of the vision together. And AI is going to blow all that out of the water, because no longer is the linear parts of things going to be the issue, because AI and artificial intelligence, and they're going to really make that much simpler to handle and to do. And so that's why, so many are concerned that jobs are going to be laid off, and because that part of the work is going to go away. But that's actually, the smart leader will say, this is a tremendous opportunity right here for innovation. And rather than looking at the vision in what positions do I need, they'll start looking at what talents do I need to
That's right.
create this vision. And so when you start looking for talents and not necessarily skills or more linear activities, then you'll really begin to tap into that nonlinear creative side to really push that vision forth and design it, basically.
That's right. And I'm glad you brought up the AI piece, Karen. And I'm having a totally separate podcast on the AI by itself and leadership. But I wanted to get your opinion on this because that is a hot topic right now.
Sure.
Do you think that AI is capable to take over a leadership position, or can you have a robot be a leader in the real world? What are your thoughts on that?
um if leadership is boss or leadership is coach, in many instances, I will think that AI will evolve to be able to handle that, because, right, the goal is set in those two
Yes,
instances, when it's leadership as boss and leadership as coach. So AI's particular, I mean, it's really good about that even already in its infant stages. Give it a goal and it'll tell you how to do it, right? So it will be able to, I don't know if leadership's the right word, because leadership is about influence, in my opinion,
hmm,
but it will be able to direct and coach people into achieving goals. Um, Now the question is, the question is not, can AI do it? I think it will be able to do it. Is, will people want it to do it? Do I want some machine telling me how to do my job, how to achieve something? I think the autonomy that is innate in every human may be the obstacle that AI cannot overcome, but time will tell, right?
yeah. So this is where my opinion is, in order for you to be a good leader, you talked about the empathy piece. You know,
Hmm.
the we're all emotional beings. At the end of the day, I think you can program a robot to identify certain emotions, but you'll never be able to connect with a person like heart to heart versus robot
Yeah,
to heart, right?
yeah, yeah,
So I think that piece will always be, it'll be very hard to kind of duplicate that from an AI
yeah.
perspective, at least.
I took a course, and it was a Udemy course, so it wasn't like any, I didn't go to Stanford for this one, but I took a course in NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming, and it talks about how everyone processes an experience, right? So we have an experience in our lives. It's, we have the five senses are involved, but the minute that experience hits our ner- nervous system, there's all this distortion, deletion, and stuff that goes on based on our values, our beliefs, our past experiences, our traumas. So all this happens like in seconds. And
Yes,
out of that, how it filtered that experience becomes how we react, how we behave, how we step forth into action if actions required. I think it even says, and I'm not sure how it comes up with the stats, but an experience, we could take in 50, I think, billion bits of information, but what comes out in the process is about 11 bits. So it's like that, and that's part of the reason why, if you ever watch any crime TV, every witness has a different piece of the puzzle. And leaders need to understand that, because that's why we do need to include everyone. That's why we do need to ask everyone, empathize with everyone,
Yes.
because if we're just doing it off our own opinions or beliefs, or even maybe us and a valued team member, we're still missing so many bits of information that could actually go into solving a problem or creating a solution, that it's crazy to think that me and my little bit is
Yes.
the answer to the world, right?
That's right. That's why a team is so important. Now,
Yeah.
Karen, you also touched on the being an authentic leader. I
Mm.
want to ask you, what does it mean to be an authentic leader, and how important is it in the leadership sense?
Well, you know, uh, authenticity has many roles. It's embodying who we are, quirks, faults, and everything, but it's also, authenticity means honesty. And so
Mhm.
if we want our employees to show up as they uniquely are, and if we want them to show up honestly, then we have to do that, right? Because
Yes.
the world is a mirror, and what we put out, we get back. And so if we put out judgment, if we put out exclusion, then that's what comes back to us. Um, is they'll exclude parts that may be important, and they'll, present parts that we think that will get them approved. Um, and they won't be honest. And that lack of honesty, um, is what steers us down the wrong path in
Mhm.
many instances, because we don't have the whole story, because they haven't been fully honest and we haven't been fully honest with them. Now, that doesn't mean we just spill our guts about everything. We do have to use discernment, which is very
Yes.
important. And, but yeah, there's a difference between dishonesty and discernment, right?
So it's interesting. So when you talk about that, and some people say you do have to be vulnerable as a leader, um, but you just said use your discretion. What are your thoughts on that, being vulnerable as a leader? And again, to what point should you be vulnerable as a leader?
Um, well, vulnerability, I mean, there are probably numerous definitions of vulnerability. Um, but I think knowing our blind spots is probably the first place you ought to start, with being vulnerable. Like, I'm really good at this, but I have these blind spots, and I need you guys to help me make sure we don't miss this part, right?
Yes.
That's vulnerability. Um, vulnerability in that, um, you know, I don't know where we're going, but I have a clear vision, and I know that together we can find the path to get there. That's vulnerability. So that there's, um, I have a contact on LinkedIn, and there's a new book out, and it talks about vulnerability in stages, and seek to be 15% more vulnerable than you are, right? Just, you don't
Mhm.
have to go all out, but how can you cross that threshold of comfort for being just a little bit more vulnerable? Um, because, there are people in life that we can trust and be fully vulnerable with, and there are people that maybe their intentions are not that great, and you don't want to throw out all your vulnerabilities, um, when you don't know that that's a person that you can trust fully.
Good. Excellent. Awesome. No, great advice, Karen. Before we wrap this up, I've got a couple rapid fire questions, as I like to call it. What is your
Okay.
what is your unconventional definition of leadership?
Hmm. My unconventional definition of leadership. Um, authenticity, acceptance, and action.
Awesome. I like that. Action's very important. And what advice would you give young people wanting to get into a leadership role?
Mm. Get clear on the goal. So talk to whoever's your superior. Get ultra clear on what that goal means to them, right? Because goals mean different things to different people.
That's
And
right.
it may be a number, but what does that number mean to your superior? And because you could meet that number, and if you didn't meet that underlying intention for them, you're not going to shine that much. I mean, yeah, you'll make the monthly report, but you won't be top of mind for fulfilling that need that they had behind that goal. And so once you get ultra clear on the goal, then realize that it's going to take your entire team, and your entire team has opinions and ideas about how to get there. Listen. Um, it's funny, I denied philosophy for a long time, but I truly believe the obstacle is the way. So as
Mm,
you're listening to them and how they feel it's possible to happen, pay attention to the obstacles that are in their way of doing what it is they know can be done, because that's really your job as a leader. Let them do it, empower them to do it, encourage them to do it, but remove the obstacles that are keeping them from doing those things. So,
that's right. That's right. That's again amazingly said, Karen. And where can people find you?
LinkedIn's my favorite place to hang out as far as social conversations. But you can also visit designforinnovation.com and you can find me there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Karen, it was a pleasure to have you on here. I have a lot of respect for you, and I greatly appreciate you taking your
Mm.
time to be on the podcast this
Yeah.
morning. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. Um,
Yes.
Looking forward to hopefully doing more with you in the future. So thank you again.
Yeah,
And
Rob, it's been a delight. Thank you so much for having me.
thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And I hope that you guys you know had a lot of takeaways from this podcast. And if you have any questions for Karen, just drop it in the comments below, and I'll make sure it'll be sent to her, and she'll be copied on the podcast anyways, and she'll see the comments. So thanks everybody, and have a great day.